But I'd like for us to spend a few minutes talking lightly and seriously about things that are important. And may we begin that by looking at just one small verse from the prophet Isaiah, the 2nd chapter, verse 4. He shall judge between the nations and shall arbitrate for many peoples. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. This is the word of God for the people of God. Praise be to God. John and I haven't always been a pastor or even a missionary. Started adult life in the Navy. Went to the Naval Academy and then took my commission in the Marine Corps. Became a helicopter pilot. Strange start for a pastor and a missionary. Back in October of 1973. Some of you may remember this month. Two midshipmen on liberty in Washington, D.C. We got a bunk and a locker at the Sailors, Marines, Airmen's, Soldier, Sailors, Marines, Airmen's Club, which was like a Y, except for soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen who were in D.C. on liberty. You got a bunk, and you got a locker, that was it. And then we went out on the town to try to sow our wild oats. We really weren't very good at it, but we were trying. And after a few beers and a little nightlife, we stumbled back to the Soldiers, Sailors, Marines, Airmen's Club, where there was, well, I don't know, she may have been 50 now that I'm thinking about it, a little old lady who was the volunteer host for the night. By the way, I turned 65 this year, so we're doing all right. But she did seem old. Welcomed us back. But on the way back, we stumbled through a park and fell over what appeared to be just debris, construction debris. Bent down and picked it up, and it was a chunk of marble. And there were two chunks of marble, and put them together, and you see they actually went together. Remember, this is October 1973, Washington, D.C. Put the two chunks of marble together, and there was the name. That's what I said. Spiro T. Avenue. What a find. Now that's a souvenir. Go to D.C., get the desk plate off the Vice President's desk. October 1973. Well, a few months later, summer of '74, we graduated. And President Nixon bumped this was so last minute that he wasn't even listed on the program. I think John Warner was supposed to be the commencement speaker. president bumped him and came, and it was, and he commissioned us as brand new ensigns and second lieutenants in the Navy and Marine Corps. His last public act. Fast forward 2005. My roommate Don, who was with me on that night of liberty in Washington, D.C. in 1973, who now works for a major defense contractor. I think I'm not supposed to tell you who that is. There are rules about this. He and I were in Newport, Rhode Island together and had breakfast, a chance meeting, had breakfast with Eagle Crow. Now you probably don't remember Bud Crow by name, but he was the young White House lawyer who was the first to turn state's evidence and took his 6 months in prison for the Watergate conspiracy. And so we told Bud Crow has a lot of stories to tell, and he tells a lot of stories just at breakfast. But we told Bud our story, and he confirmed it. He said, yeah. Yeah, he said the night that Spiro Agnew resigned, the Secret Service detail who was in charge of his security was so angry that they trashed his office. And his stuff went into the streets. They were angry because they knew they had been carrying grocery sacks of cash in and out of his office. Can I say it in the pulpit? They were pissed. They were. Okay. So Bud Crow confirms this story. He says, yeah, that's what happened. That was also the day, the very day that the name of Deep Throat was revealed. It was kind of an interesting morning because Bud was on the phone with all kinds of reporters. Bud was not Deep Throat, but he was on everybody's short list. And he certainly knew who Deep Throat was. Well, we were in Newport, Rhode Island for something else. Tom got me a seat at the table for what is called an executive level war game. These are simulations that are held at the executive level to test theories, strategies, and plans and things. Before the Pentagon puts something into action, they like to get a group together and see if this might actually work. So we're in Newport for this simulation, and there are 100 of us. It's run by the Naval War faculty from the Naval War College. There are Defense Department analysts in the room. There are State Department policy wonks in the room. There are Army and Marine officers just back from Iraq and Afghanistan. They're in the room. There are defense contractors in the room. And there's one United Methodist pastor. Makes sense of that. Well, here's the task for that 3 days. 2005. We have demonstrated to ourselves that we know how to win a war. We have also demonstrated to ourselves we don't know how to build peace. And the question for the 3 days was, can we take the same assets, resources, personnel that are successful in winning a war, can we take these same assets, resources, personnel, and build peace? Now, I learned a whole lot in those 3 days, and I hope I contributed a little bit. But 3 things that I took away from there that I think were important to us. One is the answer is yes. We can do that. And this group of 100 laid out how that could be done. And it's simply a matter of, is this what we want to do? Second thing, while it seems strange to everybody else in the room, and even strange to myself, when you're having those kinds of conversations, you really do need to have at least one pastor theologian at the table. The church needs to be present when we talk about these things. But the third thing I learned, which may be even more important to us here this morning, is that in hallway conversations and at lunch and breakfast and with others, as I got to know the people, these other 99, a lot of them, maybe even most of them, we're going to be going back home and going to church the coming weekend. Different denominations, different faiths, but you get the point. They were going to be in their house of worship that coming weekend. Now, some of them may sing in the choir even, or teach Sunday school, or maybe they just sit in a pew and sleep through the sermon. But they're going to be there. Now that raises the ante on the kinds of conversations we have on Sunday morning. Because in our pews, and you may be one of them, are people who are worshiping with us, who are going to go to work on a Monday morning and determine the fate of the planet. Maybe when you go to work on Monday morning, you're not necessarily determining the fate of the planet, but the future life of the community anyway. This is important, what we do. I do work in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And I was a missionary there in the 90s. In 1998, the end of 1998, the war in the Congo heated up. And the United Methodist Church evacuated all of its missionaries, including me. I loaded up. I was up in the mountains and loaded up my Land Cruiser with, where there were chickens on the inside, big 6-foot stalk of bananas on the top. Hate to confess this, 2 live goats strapped to the roof rack. And started the the 2-day journey out of the mountains to join the rest of the evacuating missionaries who were leaving the country. The missionaries left. And the Congolese bishop, Bishop Ntambu Nkulu, decided that the church would not run. The church would stay in place. The United Methodist Church would stay in place. Never have I been more proud to be a United Methodist. And I say that understanding that one of the marks of a good United Methodist is we work well with others. We play well with others. So I don't want to just say we're the only good people, but this time we did a good thing. We did the right thing, we did the brave thing. And the bishop stayed in place. And he kept the pastors in place. In fact, he continued to appoint pastors into the war zone, not as combatants, but to be in ministry. In a time when everybody else was running, the church stayed in place. And there were losses. Pastors lost their lives. Oh, this isn't just about pastors. Okay? John, this would be good for you to know that in the United Methodist Church in the Congo, lay people are subject to the bishop's appointment, especially if you work in education or medicine. I need you in this community. So it wasn't just the pastors who were being sent into the war zone. Educators were being sent, doctors were being sent, nurses were being sent. And it turned the war. Not as combatants, but as ministers of the gospel. Pastors were sent into the camps of warlords. And as they arrived, they would say, "The bishop has sent me. I am your pastor." Now, that's a totally different kind of evangelism than I've ever understood. It's not a, "Do you want to go to church with me on Sunday?" It is, "I am your pastor." And as these pastoral visits were made at great risk, when the time was right, the bishop said, "I want all of the warlords to come to my house, and we're going to talk about peace." And that's what happened. Now, I don't know all of the issues in Rushville. I can guess, because I suspect they're not a whole lot different than all of the issues in Plainfield. And I don't know what stirs you, or what angers you, or causes you to be afraid, either personally, as families, or as a community. But I would suggest this. In these scary times, what we talk with one another about on a Sunday morning is important. Not just to us, but to the whole world. Building peace requires all the assets that we can muster.